March 7, 1945. A cellar beneath the shattered remnants of a post office in Wesel, Germany. The air is thick with the ghosts of burnt paper and the metallic tang of cordite. It tastes like dust and defeat. For 3 days, the world has been a constant, deafening rumble, the percussive symphony of Allied artillery turning the world upstairs into a jagged landscape of brick and twisted steel. Down here, in the damp, trembling dark, the only light is a single hurricane lamp, its flame dancing nervously, casting long, skeletal shadows against the stone walls. It illuminates the pale, smudged faces of 20 young women, all clad in the field gray uniforms of the Wehrmacht Helferinnenkorps. They are signals auxiliaries, telephone operators, clerks. They are not soldiers, not in the way the men bleeding in the streets are soldiers. But the uniform makes no distinction to a 155mm shell. Anneliese Schmidt, a 20-year-old not-Christian Helferin from Hamburg, presses her back against the cool, weeping stone. Her fingers, stained with ink and grime, trace the lightning bolt insignia on her sleeve, the badge that once felt like a mark of purpose, of contribution to the fatherland. Now it feels like a target. The headset she wore for endless hours, connecting frantic calls from command posts that no longer existed, lies discarded in a corner, its wires tangled like a dead serpent. The rhythmic boom-thump of the big guns has subsided, replaced by a new sound, a more intimate and terrifying one, the sharp, sporadic crack of M1 Garand rifles, the guttural shouts in a language she barely understands. English, American. They are in the streets above. They are clearing the buildings. A girl named Lotta begins to sob, a choked, rhythmic sound that sets Annaliese's teeth on edge. "Be quiet," hisses Ilsa, the senior auxiliary, a stern woman of 30 whose authority has crumbled with the city around them. "Do you want them to find us with grenades?" Lotta stifles the sound with a dirty fist, her body shaking. They all know the stories, the whispers passed down from the East about what happens to women when a city falls, the propaganda films, the desperate warnings from their officers. But here, on the edge of the Rhine, the enemy is not the Red Army. Does that make a difference? No one knows. The uncertainty is a physical weight, pressing down on their chests, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, a thunderous crash from above. Wood splinters. Heavy boots stomp on the floorboards that serve as their ceiling. The shouting is directly overhead now. Anneliese flinches, her eyes squeezed shut. This is it. The lamp flickers violently as dust and debris rain down. A voice, amplified and distorted, bellows something in German. The accent is thick, clumsy. "Kommen Sie raus, mit Hände hoch. Out now, hands up." A silence hangs in the cellar, thick and suffocating. No one moves. They are a statue of collective fear. Then the floorboards creak, and a brilliant, blinding beam of light slices through the darkness, pinning them like insects. It sweeps across their faces one by one. Young, terrified faces. Anneliese raises a hand to shield her eyes, the light feeling like a physical blow. More shouting. The cellar door is kicked open with a splintering crack, and the silhouette of a man in a strange, rounded helmet fills the frame. He holds a rifle, its form menacing and absolute. Behind him, more shapes, more helmets, more rifles. The American soldiers pour down the stone steps, their movements practiced, efficient. They smell of sweat, wet wool, and something sweet like chewing gum. "Hände hoch, get them up," one of them barks. 20 pairs of hands shoot into the air. The soldiers seem surprised. They were expecting a holdout of Wehrmacht infantry, not a cellar full of women in uniform. A GI, younger than Anneliese, lowers his rifle slightly, a look of confusion on his face. He nudges his sergeant. "What the hell do we do with these, Sarge?" The sergeant, a man with a tired, weathered face, spits on the floor. He surveys the room, his eyes lingering on their uniforms, their insignias. He sees not women, but enemy personnel. "They're prisoners," he says, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Get 'em on their feet, search 'em, and move 'em out. The war's over for them." The words, spoken in English, are understood only by their tone. It is the tone of finality. Annalise feels rough hands pat her down, confiscating the small pocket knife she used to peel apples and a worn photograph of her family. She is pushed towards the stairs, stumbling into the gray, apocalyptic light of the ruined city. The air stinks of smoke and death. She and the others are herded into a line against a pockmarked wall. They are prisoners of war. The chaos of the battle is over, but a new, terrifying uncertainty has just begun. They are marched through the rubble, past the dead, their future a blank page about to be written by their captors. The back of the GMC CCKW deuce-and-a-half truck is a world of jarring motion and cold, suffocating darkness. The canvas flap is drawn tight, allowing only thin slivers of gray light to penetrate, illuminating the 20 women huddled together on the hard wooden benches. Annalise sits pressed between Ilse and a silent girl from the Luftwaffe Helferinnen, their shoulders and hips knocking together with every lurch and sway of the vehicle. The roar of the engine is a constant, oppressive drone, punctuated by the grinding of gears as the driver navigates the cratered roads leading away from Wiesel, away from everything they have ever known. The smell is of diesel fumes, damp wool, and the sour scent of fear that seems to emanate from their very pores. No one speaks. There is nothing to say. Each is trapped in her own private universe of shock and dread. Where are they going? What will happen to them? After what feels like an eternity, the truck shudders to a halt. The canvas is thrown back, and the sudden influx of daylight is blinding. Raus, everybody out, schnell! The command is sharp, impatient. They climb down stiffly, their legs numb, onto a vast, muddy field churned into a brown morass by countless tires and boots. In the distance, the Rhine flows sluggishly, a silver ribbon under a perpetually overcast sky. All around them is a scene of organized chaos. Thousands upon thousands of German soldiers, a sea of field gray, are being marshaled by a handful of American GIs. This is a Rhine-Wiesenlager, a Rhine meadow camp, a temporary cage for the tidal wave of surrenders from the collapsing Ruhr pocket. There is no shelter, no barracks, no latrines, just the open sky and the mud. A single strand of barbed wire, hastily strung between wooden posts, marks the perimeter of their new world. The women are separated from the men, herded into a smaller, equally bleak enclosure. Here, they are a strange and varied collection. Annalise sees the familiar signals insignia of her own unit, but also the medical crosses of nurses from the Deutsches Rotes Kreuz, the sharp uniforms of administrators from the organization Tod, and even the chilling double lightning bolts of a few SS Helferinnen, who stand apart, their faces hard and defiant. The initial shock gives way to a grim, leveling reality. Rank, unit, and past allegiances begin to dissolve in the face of shared misery. They are all just prisoners, all cold, all hungry. The first days are a blur of survival. A single water truck arrives once a day. The food is a thin slice of bread and a ladle of watery soup. The nights are the worst. They huddle together for warmth on the cold, damp ground, listening to the coughing and weeping that ripples through the darkness. The guards are distant figures, mostly indifferent, standing on watchtowers or patrolling the wire. The only direct interaction is during the perfunctory interrogations. Annalise is pulled from the crowd and led to a canvas tent where a young American officer, an intelligence lieutenant who looks barely older than she is, sits at a folding table. He asks for her name, rank, and unit. He wants to know about troop movements, radio frequencies, the morale of her unit in the final days. His German is passable, learned at a university far away. Annalise answers in a monotone, her mind numb. She knows nothing of strategic value. She was a telephone operator. She connected calls. She typed reports. The officer seems to sense her insignificance in the grand machine of the Wehrmacht. He makes a few notes on a form, his expression bored, and dismisses her with a wave of his hand. She is just another number, another piece of administrative debris from a shattered army. As she walks back to the women's enclosure, she understands. They are not seen as a threat. They are a problem, a logistical inconvenience. What is to be done with several thousand female prisoners of war? The question hangs in the air, as thick as the ever-present river fog. Weeks crawl by. The mud becomes a part of their existence. Sickness begins to spread. A quiet, gnawing despair takes root. Then, a rumor starts, a whisper passed from one huddle of women to another. It begins with a guard talking too loudly, with a snippet of conversation overheard near the administration tent. They are not staying here. This is just a transit point. They are being moved again, to a permanent camp. The rumor has specifics. Ships are being prepared. They are going to England. The word England sounds impossibly foreign, impossibly far away. For some, it sparks a flicker of hope. Anything is better than this field of mud. But for Annalise, it is a new kind of terror. They would be crossing the sea, leaving the continent, leaving Germany behind entirely. She looks out at the barbed wire, at the gray river, at the endless gray sky. The cage was about to get much, much bigger. The crossing is a nauseating, gray ordeal. Packed into the hold of a repurposed Liberty ship, the women endure the heaving of the North Sea in a twilight world of steel walls and the constant, throbbing vibration of the engines. The air is stale, heavy with the smell of brine and vomit. When they finally disembark, stumbling onto the solid ground of an English port, the air feels different. It's damp, cool, and carries the scent of coal smoke and the sea. The language is a constant, unintelligible chatter around them. They are herded onto another train, this one with windows, and for the first time in months, they see a world not ravaged by war. Green fields, stone cottages with neat gardens, civilians who stare with open curiosity, not hatred. It is profoundly disorienting. Their destination is a place of stark, geometric order. Camp 99, a purpose-built prisoner-of-war camp in the rolling hills of Lancashire. Gone is the chaotic mud of the Rheinwiesenlager. Here, everything is arranged in precise, unforgiving lines. Long, black Nissen huts sit on concrete foundations, surrounded by manicured paths and towering fences of barbed wire, intricate and inescapable. Watchtowers stand at each corner, silent sentinels against the sky. This is not a temporary holding pen. This is a permanent institution, designed for long-term confinement. The daily routine descends upon them with crushing, relentless predictability. It begins before dawn with the harsh clang of a bell. Then the first appel, or roll call. They stand in neat rows on the gravel parade ground as a British sergeant, a stern man with a bristling mustache, counts them off. His voice is a sharp bark, calling out numbers in English. They learn their prisoner numbers quickly. Their names are irrelevant here. After the count, breakfast. A mug of weak, milky tea and a slice of bread with a smear of margarine. Then the day unfolds into a vast, empty expanse of time. This is the new enemy, not the hunger, not the cold, but the idleness, the sheer, grinding monotony of the hours. In the field camp, survival had been a full-time occupation. Here, survival is guaranteed, but purpose is gone. The psychological weight of this void is immense. Some women are assigned work details, in the laundry, the kitchens, or mending stacks of uniforms under the watchful eyes of female guards from the Auxiliary Territorial Service. But there are not enough jobs for everyone. For most, including Annalise, the hours must simply be endured. They sit on their hard bunks inside the Nissen hut, the air cool and smelling of damp concrete and disinfectant. They watch dust motes dance in the slivers of light from the high, small windows. They watch the clouds drift over the hills beyond the wire. The passage of time becomes a physical burden. Annalise finds herself tracing the corrugated patterns on the steel walls with her finger, over and over, just for something to do. The other women cope in different ways. Ilsa, the former senior auxiliary, tries to maintain a semblance of military discipline, demanding that bunks be made perfectly and uniforms kept clean, a futile attempt to impose order on their powerless existence. A former SS secretary named Greta, whose face is a permanent mask of cynical disdain, hoards scraps of food and trades favors, creating her own small hierarchy of influence within the hut. She scoffs at Ilsa's efforts. "Discipline?" she says one afternoon, her voice a low sneer. We are cattle. The only thing that matters is getting the best patch of grass. Annalise listens to the arguments, the whispers, the quiet sobbing at night, and feels a part of herself starting to fray. The uncertainty of her family's fate is a constant, dull ache. Letters are heavily censored and arrive months late, if at all. News of Germany is filtered through the camp administration, grim reports of occupation, starvation, and ruin. They are suspended in time, disconnected from the world they knew, with no idea when or if they will ever return. The waiting is not passive. It is an active, corrosive force, eating away at their resolve, their memories, their very sense of self. One afternoon, sitting on her bunk, Annalise watches a guard carelessly toss a crumpled English newspaper into a waste bin. An idea, small and fragile, begins to form in her mind. It is a desperate, almost nonsensical impulse, but it is better than the nothingness. It is a rebellion not against the wire or the guards, but against the suffocating emptiness of the clock. She waits until the guard is gone, then retrieves the discarded paper. Its pages are filled with meaningless symbols, but they represent a world outside this hut, a world of thought and purpose. She smooths it out on her blanket, her heart beating a little faster. It's just a piece of paper, but in the vast desert of her days, it feels like a map. The newspaper becomes a sacred object. In the dim light of the Nissen hut after the evening meal, Annalise gathers a small, hesitant group. There is Lotta, the young girl who sobbed in the cellar, still prone to bouts of despair. There is a quiet, thoughtful woman named Katrin, who was a university student before being conscripted into the Signal Corps, and a few others, drawn by a desperate curiosity. Annalise, whose own English is rudimentary, points to the bold letters of a headline. "This word," she says, her voice a conspiratorial whisper, "I heard the guards say it. Weather." She pronounces it carefully. Katrin, who had studied some English, nods and corrects her pronunciation. Weather. And so it begins. The University of Barbed Wire is born not in a lecture hall, but in the cramped, whispered corners of Hut 12. It is an act of intellectual defiance. Using the salvage newspaper, they start to build a vocabulary, word by painstaking word. Annalise writes the English words on scraps of toilet paper with a tiny stub of a pencil she traded a portion of her bread for. Katrin explains the rudiments of grammar she can remember. It is slow, frustrating work, but it is work. It is a structure they impose upon the shapeless days. The small circle of students grows. Soon they have a dozen women, huddled together, mouthing the strange foreign sounds. The act of learning is a small reclamation of their minds, a statement that they are more than just their prisoner numbers. The movement spreads. In another hut, a woman who had been a primary school teacher begins giving history lectures. She speaks of Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Empire, of Bismarck and the unification of Germany. She carefully navigates the timeline, telling the grand story of their people while studiously avoiding the treacherous, painful history of the last 12 years. It is a selective nostalgia, a way of remembering a Germany that existed before the ruin, a homeland of poets and thinkers, not dictators and death camps. They sing old folk songs, the ones about the Rhine and the Black Forest, their voices low so as not to attract the attention of the guards. A woman who was a seamstress teaches others how to unthread old socks to re-knit them into mittens, their hands kept busy against the creeping damp and the idleness. The British camp authorities watch this quiet flourishing of activity with a mixture of indifference and mild suspicion. As long as the prisoners remain orderly, they are left alone. The female ATS guards, many of whom are not much older than the prisoners themselves, sometimes watch with a detached curiosity. They see women mending, learning, talking. They do not see the fierce psychological battle being waged. For this fragile, self-made community is a fortress against despair. It gives them a reason to get up after the morning appel. It provides a new set of routines to replace the ones they have lost. But the war outside the wire grinds on, and its shadow is long. The news that trickles in becomes ever more grim. The fall of Berlin, the unconditional surrender, the suicide of the Führer. Each piece of information is a blow, chipping away at the foundation of their world. They served a regime that has now utterly ceased to exist, a cause that has been ground into ash. The question of what it was all for hangs unspoken in the air. One evening in late May, a new transport of prisoners arrives at Camp 99. These are women captured in the final, chaotic days in Berlin, their faces edged with a horror the earlier arrivals cannot comprehend. They bring with them first-hand stories of the street fighting, of the Russian onslaught, of the utter devastation of the capital. One of the new women, a pale, hollow-eyed nurse, sits on a bunk in Hut 12, her voice barely a whisper as she describes the scenes. She talks of the fires that burned for days, of the smell of death that hung over the city, of the division of Germany into zones of occupation. "There is nothing left," she says, her voice breaking. "Hamburg, Dresden, Berlin, it is all gone. We have no country to return to." A profound silence falls over the hut. The carefully constructed world of English lessons and history lectures suddenly feels pathetic, a child's game played in the shadow of a Holocaust. The reality of their defeat, absolute and catastrophic, has finally breached the wire. The fragile morale they had fought so hard to build crumbles into dust. The news from Berlin acts like a poison, seeping into the camp's fragile ecosystem of routine. The history lectures stop. No one feels like recalling the glories of a nation that now lies in ruins. The singing at night ceases. The old folk songs sound like hollow mockeries. Annaliese's English class shrinks, the students listless and distracted. What is the point of learning the language of their conquerors when their own world has been obliterated? A heavy, lethargic depression settles over the huts. The women drift through the days, their movements slow, their eyes vacant. The enemy is no longer monotony. It is a profound, soul-crushing grief for a lost world and an unknown future. For Annalise, it is a moment of crisis. The purpose she had manufactured for herself has evaporated. She watches the despair claim the women around her, sees the light go out of their eyes, and a cold fear grips her. To surrender to this would be a different kind of death. One evening, she finds Catherine staring out a window at the wire, her expression blank. "It's over," Catherine says without turning. "Everything we were, everything we believed in, it was all a lie built on murder. And we helped them. We answered the phones and typed the letters. The guilt, long suppressed, is now raw and exposed. Annalise has no answer for her. She feels it too, a nauseating shame. But in that moment, she also feels a flicker of defiance. Maybe, Annalise says softly, but we are not over. We are still here, and we must be ready for what comes next." Her words sound thin, unconvincing, even to herself. But she acts on them. The next day, she resumes the English class with only 3 students. She doesn't just teach vocabulary from the newspaper. She starts trying to translate the articles about the new Allied Control Council, about the plans for rebuilding, about the trials that are being prepared for war criminals. "We need to understand," she tells them. "We need to know what kind of world we will be returning to." It is a subtle shift, from surviving the present to preparing for the future. Slowly, painfully, a few more women rejoin the group. They are not studying out of hope, but out of a grim necessity. As the months turn into a year, the nature of their captivity changes. The war is long over. They are no longer just prisoners of war. They are subjects of an ideological re-education. The British authorities begin a formal denazification program. Questionnaires are distributed, long, detailed documents demanding information on party membership, on their service, on their knowledge of atrocities. Interrogations are no longer perfunctory. They are searching, deeply personal examinations of conscience. The women are forced to confront the reality of the concentration camps, shown photographs and newsreels that leave them shaken and physically ill. The process is brutal, stripping away the last vestiges of their old identity and forcing them to look at the horrors their nation committed. Some grow defensive and defiant. Others, like Annalise, retreat into a quiet, tormented shame. Finally, in the summer of 1946, the announcements begin. Repatriation. The word itself feels like a dream. Their names are called out, group by group. They are issued with discharge papers and civilian clothes donated by aid societies, ill-fitting dresses and worn-out coats that feel strange and foreign after years in a uniform. The day Annalise's name is called, she feels not elation, but a deep, trembling apprehension. She walks with her group through the camp gates, the same gates she had entered what felt like a lifetime ago. The barbed wire is now behind her. She is free. But as she boards the train that will take her to a port, and then a ship that will take her back to the rubble of Hamburg, she realizes the confinement is not truly over. She carries an invisible cage within her. The long, empty hours, the fight against the slow erosion of the self, the crushing weight of her nation's guilt, these are the unseen horizons of her past. She has survived the war and the wire, but the struggle against the silence, against the waiting, has marked her in ways no physical scar ever could. She is going home, but she is no longer the person who left.